Hello there, and welcome to the Drift to the Stars. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Whatever kind of day it was, long or quiet, or somewhere in between, you made it here, and that matters. This is a place where we slow down together, where we let the big, patient facts of the universe do what they have always done, remind us that we are small and held, and part of something that has been going on for a very long time, without needing anything from us at all. And just before we begin, if these calm, curious explorations help you unwind, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. Now, if you're ready, let's begin. There is a place, not so far away in the scale of things, where a human being once stood and turned around. They turned slowly, the way you might turn in a field at dusk when you want to see all of it at once. And what they saw behind them was everything. Every mountain, every ocean, every person who had ever lived, or was living then, or would live after. All of it, gathered into a single blue shape, hanging in a darkness so complete, it had no edges. The moon is the only place beyond Earth where human beings have stood and looked back. Not looked forward into the unknown, though they did that too. Looked back, turned, in the silence of a world with no air and no sound, and found the whole of human experience contained in something they could cover with a thumb. Picture that for a moment. Not the astronaut suits, not the mission data, not the technical achievement of getting there, just the turning, the pause, the recognition that home was visible and small and whole, and impossibly beautiful, from a distance of 250,000 miles. There is something in that image that asks nothing of you. It only offers. It says, you are on that blue thing. You have always been on it. And from out there, it looks like the most precious object in all that dark. Scientists call the moon our nearest neighbor in space. But neighbor is such a small word for something that witnessed every moment of human history from exactly that same quiet distance, patient, round, and always there. You are part of what was visible from that turning place. You always have been. Settle a little deeper now. The space between the Earth and the moon is not empty in the way a room is empty. It is vast, the way a held breath is vast, full of something you can't quite name, and larger than it appears. If you were to line up every continent on Earth, all 7 of them, edge to edge, Antarctica and Eurasia and the Americas and all the rest, and stretch them in a row, they would still not reach the moon. You could fit all the land on Earth in the gap between this world and that one, and have room remaining, not barely, comfortably. Think of it the way you might think of a long, quiet drive at night, the kind where the radio is low and the road is straight, and the towns are far apart. Now, multiply that feeling by something beyond easy imagining. The moon is close enough to see, close enough that its light falls on your skin on a clear night, and still, the distance between here and there is a kind of vastness that the body doesn't quite believe. That gap is mostly nothing, mostly silence. A few stray atoms, the occasional wandering particle of solar wind, the slow ghost drift of light traveling at the only speed it knows. And through all of that, across all that patient emptiness, the moon pulls at the oceans, pulls at the crust beneath your feet, pulls gently at the water in your blood. Distance, it turns out, is not the same as separation. Something that far away can still reach you. Something that far away has been reaching you, quietly, your entire life. Somewhere on the moon right now, in a place called Tranquility Base, there are footprints. Not ruins, not remnants. Footprints, clear and sharp as if they were made this morning, pressed into a fine grey dust that has no wind to blur them, no rain to soften them, no seasons to slowly erase them. Boot-shaped impressions in ancient rock powder, holding the exact weight and stride of the people who made them, preserved in a silence so complete, it functions almost like a kind of care. They have been there for more than 50 years. they will be there for millions more. On Earth, a footprint in sand lasts until the next wave, or the next wind, or the next animal passing through. Our marks are temporary, almost by definition absorbed back into the world that made us, gently and without ceremony. But up there, in a place where nothing erodes and nothing changes, a human step became a kind of permanence that we almost never achieve. There is something deeply consoling in this, if you let yourself feel it. The idea that a moment of arrival, a boot meeting the surface of another world for the first time in all of history, is still there, still holding, still the exact shape of that specific foot on that specific morning in 1969. The universe kept it, not on purpose perhaps, but kept it all the same. Your own steps through the world leave their marks too, in ways less literal but no less real. The moon simply has a longer memory than most. Even now, without looking, you know roughly where the moon is. Not the exact degree of arc, not the precise coordinate, but somewhere in you, something older than thought tracks the slow wheel of the night sky and knows approximately where that light belongs. Humans have always known. It is one of the oldest kinds of knowing there is. The moon moves across the sky so gently that if you stand outside on a clear night and watch it for a full minute, you will barely see it shift. A fraction, a suggestion of movement. The way a cloud moves when you're not watching, you look away, you look back, and something has changed, but the change itself was invisible. This is not stillness. The moon is moving, always moving, tracing its path with the patient consistency of something that has been doing this for 4.5 billion years. It has never hurried. It has never slowed. It continues at exactly the pace it has always kept, following a curve so gradual and so ancient that for most of human history, people simply called it reliable. There is a particular quality of comfort in things that move slowly and without urgency. A ceiling fan in summer, a river seen from a bridge, breath when you remember to notice it. The moon moves the way deep. Time moves not fast enough to watch, but fast enough that by morning everything will have shifted. And that gradual, patient turning is one of the most constant things in the life of everyone who has ever lived on this planet. Right now, it is moving, quietly, without any need for your attention. Before there were oceans, before there was any water at all on this world, before the first cell divided in the first warm tide pool, there was an impact. Something vast, roughly the size of Mars, drifted into the young Earth's path and struck it. Not an explosion, not a catastrophe, in the way we use that word for small things. A collision at the scale of worlds, so enormous that the material thrown outward from both bodies, molten rock, vaporized crust, the deep, hot interior of two planets briefly touching, slowly gathered in orbit around what remained of Earth, pulling together over thousands of years into a single cooling shape. That shape became the moon. The moon is not something that arrived from elsewhere. It did not form in a distant part of the solar system and wander into our neighborhood. It is made, at least partly, of Earth. Rock that was once below your feet. Material that was once part of the same body you are standing on right now. In a sense that is more than poetic, the moon is a piece of home that left and stayed nearby. Scientists still refine the details of exactly how this happened, the angle of impact, what the other body was made of, how long the coalescence took. But the broad shape of the story holds. Two became one planet and one moon, and the moon has been keeping watch ever since, made partly of the same ancient substance that eventually became the ground beneath every human foot. The moon was never foreign. It was always, in the deepest sense, ours. Right now, far below where you are resting, the ocean is moving. Not just at the surface, where you can see the waves and the tides and the shifting line of the shore. Deep down, in water so dark and cold that no sunlight has ever reached it, in pressure so immense that the water itself behaves differently than water above even there. something is responding to the moon. The moon's gravity reaches to the ocean floor. It pulls the water, all of it, the entire column from surface to trench, in a slow and rhythmic response to its presence in the sky. Twice a day, the sea rises toward the moon. Twice a day, it settles back, not just at the shore, but throughout the entire body of every ocean on the planet, moving together in a choreography so gradual and vast that no single part of it looks like movement at all. Picture a blanket being gently lifted at one end. The whole of it responds, but the far corner barely seems to shift. That is the ocean, from the outside. From the inside, from the perspective of a deep-sea creature drifting in total darkness, it is a slow and reliable tide of pressure, the moon, felt through miles of water, arriving as a barely perceptible shift in the weight of the world above. The moon has been doing this longer than there have been oceans deep enough to pull, longer than fish, longer than water in its current form. Even now, as you rest, it continues. Every year, the moon moves a little farther away, not dramatically, not in any way you could see or feel or measure without very precise instruments. The width of a fingernail, roughly 1.5 inches, is how much distance grows between the Earth and Moon in a year. At that pace, it would take more lifetimes than there have been humans to notice any real change in how the moon looks from here. And yet, it is going, slowly, patiently, following the physics of orbiting bodies the way water follows gravity, not because anything decided it should, but because the mathematics of it is simply what it is. There is something in this that could feel melancholy if you let it tilt that way. But something else is also true. The moon has been drifting like this for billions of years, and it is still there, still round and silver in the sky, still close enough to move the seas, still close enough that its light reaches a window near where you are sleeping. The drift is slow enough that for every human civilization that has ever looked up, every culture that has named it, painted it, calculated its phases, navigated by its light, the moon has looked exactly as it looks tonight. None of them noticed the leaving. Some departures are so gentle they are indistinguishable from staying. The moon will be in that sky for a very long time yet, long past anything either of us will need to concern ourselves with tonight. On the moon, there is silence. Not the silence of a room late at night, when the house has settled and the street is still, and you become aware of how quiet can actually be. That silence still has things in it. The small sounds of your own body, the distant hum of a city, the movement of air through the building around you. That silence is full of the residue of sound. The moon has none of this. There is no air to carry a wave, no medium through which pressure can travel. If you struck two rocks together on the surface, which the astronauts did, incidentally, to test the soil, the sound would exist only in the bones of your hands. It would not leave you. It would not travel outward. It would simply stop at the boundary of your body, and the world around you would remain exactly as it was before. This is a silence that has no comparison on Earth. It is not empty, it is complete. The difference between emptiness and completeness is the difference between a room with nothing in it and a room where everything has been perfectly, permanently stilled. Scientists call the moon a geologically quiet world. What they mean is that almost nothing disturbs it. No wind shapes its plains. No rain carves its valleys. Even its interior, once slightly restless, has cooled to something very close to stillness. The most complete silence in this part of the solar system is resting in the sky above you right now, doing absolutely nothing, asking absolutely nothing, simply continuing. That is, in its own way, a kind of company. The moon has only ever shown you one face. For as long as human beings have existed, for as long as any creature with eyes has looked up at the night sky, the same side of the moon has been turned toward Earth. The same plains, the same craters, the same familiar pattern that different cultures have seen as a rabbit, a woman, a face, a map. Always the same one. Always this one. This is not an accident, and not a coincidence. It is the result of something called tidal locking, a process by which the moon's rotation gradually slowed over billions of years until it matched the pace of its orbit exactly so that one side perpetually faces inward toward us and the other perpetually faces outward toward the deep. The moon has a whole other side that no human eye ever saw until a spacecraft circled it in 1959. A side more cratered, more ancient-looking, more marked by the early violence of the solar system. A side that has been facing the dark since before there were humans to wonder about it. And yet the side we know, this side, the one with the Sea of Tranquility and the ocean of storms and the soft dark plains the ancients called seas, this side has been showing itself, patient and unchanged, to everything that has ever lived on this planet and looked up. Your ancestors saw exactly what you see, the same face, the same quiet arrangement of light and shadow. Some things have been with us longer than we know how to feel. On the moon, there are mountains. They rise from the surface the way mountains rise anywhere from ancient upheaval, from the slow accumulation of material, from the memory of forces that acted long ago and then became still. But these mountains have never known a cloud, never felt rain against their slopes. No river has carved a valley between them. No glacier has smoothed their edges. No wind has worn them toward softness over millions of years. They are sharp, precise. The way a line drawn in pencil on clean paper is precise before anything smudges it. Some of them are taller than Everest, taller than the highest point any human being has reached by climbing, in all the long history of human climbing. And they stand in a silence that has never been interrupted, not by weather, not by biology, not by any sound that did not originate in the movement of the rock itself. There is a particular quality to a high place that human beings seem to feel in the body. Something opens, something settles. The distance between the ground and the sky becomes legible in a new way, and the smallness of a leaf, the person standing there, becomes somehow not frightening but clarifying. Those mountains on the moon carry that quality undiluted by anything. Pure altitude, pure silence, pure height above a surface that has not changed in a billion years. They are there right now, in the dark on the half of the moon not facing the sun, or bright and shadowless in the lunar day, standing exactly as they have always stood, wrapped in the most complete quiet in the solar system, vast and still, and asking nothing of anyone. Every photon of light that falls on your face on a moonlit night began its journey at the Sunday, not at the moon. The moon makes nothing. It generates no light of its own, produces no warmth from its interior that reaches the surface, emits nothing outward into the dark. What it does, what it has always done, with a kind of quiet faithfulness that goes unremarked because it is so constant, is catch the light that falls on it and send some of it back. The sun releases light in all directions, the way a fire releases warmth in all directions, without preference or aim. Some of that light travels outward for 8 minutes across the emptiness between the sun and earth. Some of it, on its way, strikes the moon, and the moon, rocky, still, unhurried, reflects a portion of that light back across the 250,000 miles between itself and Earth, where it arrives at your window, softened, scattered, reduced to something gentle enough to sleep beside. Moonlight is second-hand light, borrowed light, light that has already traveled an enormous distance, touched an ancient surface, and made the return journey without losing any of its quietness along the way. There is something in this that feels like a kindness, not the bright insistence of the sun, which asks you to see everything clearly and move through the world decisively. The moon offers the same light, gentled, translated, returned to you in a form that asks nothing more than that you notice it is there, pale on the floor, silver through the curtain, ancient and quiet and still arriving. Between the moon's surface and the emptiness of space, there is something so faint it barely earns the word atmosphere. It is called an exosphere, a word that means, essentially, an atmosphere so thin that the particles within it almost never collide with each other. They simply drift, individually, rarely touching anything, rarely gathering into the kind of density that would register as air, or pressure, or weather. It is less like a blanket and more like a suggestion. And yet, it is there. Sodium, potassium, hydrogen, helium, a ghostly inventory of elements, hovering above the surface in numbers so small they would constitute a vacuum by any measure used on Earth. If you could gather all of the Moon's atmosphere and compress it into a single breath, scientists estimate it would not fill a small room. The Moon breathes, in a sense, very gently, almost not at all. Some of this exosphere is constantly being replenished, knocked off the surface by the solar wind, by micrometeorites, by the slow grinding of temperature changes across the rock. It is a fragile, perpetually refreshed thing. This near-nothing envelope, it forms and disperses and forms again, quietly, in the space just above a surface that otherwise has no weather and no air and no sky, in the sense we mean the word. The Moon is not entirely bare. It wears something. It is just wearing it so lightly you would never know unless you looked very carefully, with instruments built precisely for the purpose of finding almost nothing. Almost nothing, it turns out, is still something. Right now, the ground beneath you is rising. Not in any way you can feel, not in any way that would disturb a glass of water on a table, or shift the picture on your wall, or register in the body as anything other than ordinary stillness. But the solid rock of the Earth's crust, the stone and mantle beneath every city and forest and ocean bed, flexes in response to the Moon's gravity, the same way the ocean does. This is called the Earth tide, or the solid tide, and it is real and measurable, and it happens twice a day, every day, following the same patient rhythm as the ocean tides that are easier to see. The ground rises by roughly 20 centimeters at its peak, closer to the length of your hand than to anything dramatic. Then it settles back. Then it rises again, over and over, at a pace so slow and a scale so vast that no individual standing on the surface has ever felt it directly. Geologists use instruments called tiltmeters and gravimeters, devices of extraordinary sensitivity, to measure this flexing. They use it to calibrate their other measurements. The Moon's pull on the solid Earth is so consistent, so reliable, so perfectly timed, that it functions as a kind of natural clock against which other instruments are checked. The ground you are resting on is not as fixed as it feels. It is, very gently, breathing, pulled by the same force that shapes the tides, moves the seas, and has been doing this without interruption since long before anyone was here to measure it. The Moon holds you more than you have perhaps considered. On a clear evening, if you watch the sky carefully as the light fades, you will see it happen. The sun touches the horizon in the west and begins to sink. And at that same moment, not before, not after, but at that same slow dusk, the full moon lifts itself above the eastern horizon, rising as the sun sets, as if the two of them were held at opposite ends of the same invisible thread. This is not coincidence. It is geometry. A full moon is full precisely because it is on the opposite side of the Earth from the sun positioned, so that the sun's light falls directly on the face it turns toward us. And that opposition means, by the same geometry, that as the sun goes down on one side, the moon must be coming up on the other. The sky holds them in balance. For a few minutes during a full moon rising, if the air is clear and the horizon is flat, you can stand in a field and see both: the last warm red light of the sun behind you and the pale rising disk of the moon ahead. The sky between them is a deep, extraordinary blue that exists nowhere else in nature, the particular color of a sky in perfect transition, lit from two directions by two different qualities of light. Every full moon rise has been this way, since the moon first settled into its orbit. Every culture that has ever watched the sky has seen this same slow exchange. An ancient breath, taken every month, out and in, out and in. In the oldest, most undisturbed places on the Moon, the highlands, the ancient crater rims, the regions far from where lava once flowed, there is rock. Not unusual as a statement, but this rock is different in a particular way. It has not been weathered by wind, because there is no wind. It has not been dissolved by rain, because there is no rain. It has not been compressed by the movement of plates, or heated by volcanic activity, or reshaped by the grinding of glaciers. It has simply sat there, in vacuum and silence, since the solar system was in its earliest, most chaotic youth. Some of the rock collected by the Apollo astronauts is 4.5 billion years old, which means it formed when the sun itself was new, when the planets were still assembling themselves from clouds of gas and dust, when the whole neighborhood of space around this star was being sorted into the shapes it would keep. Nothing on Earth's surface is that old. Our crust is too active, too restless, too given to recycling and reshaping itself. But the Moon kept what it was given. The Moon held on to those first materials with the same faithful stillness it has always kept. Held in human hands on a laboratory table, those rocks were the oldest objects anyone had ever touched. Older than any ocean, older than any mountain range, older than any form of life. The Moon is, among other things, a museum of the beginning. It has kept the door open, quietly, the whole time. In 1969, Buzz Aldrin stepped down from the ladder of the lunar module and looked out at the surface around him. He was the second human being to stand on the Moon. He had a few hours. He had instruments to deploy, samples to collect, coordinates to report back. And yet, in the middle of all that purposeful activity, he paused long enough to reach for a description of what he saw. He called it magnificent desolation. 2 words, pulled from the English language and placed together in that particular order by a man standing on another world, trying to tell the people back home what it felt like to be there. Not just what it looked like, what it felt like. Magnificent, enormous, worthy of awe, of a scale and quality that exceeds ordinary expectation. Desolation, emptiness, absence, a place where nothing is alive and nothing moves and nothing breaks the silence. Both at once, not one and then the other. Both simultaneously, in the same view, in the same moment, held by the same person in a spacesuit with a limited air supply on a surface no human had touched before. There is something deeply true in that pairing. The things that move us most are often the things that combine grandeur with stillness. That hold beauty and emptiness in the same image without resolving the tension between them. The Moon is still both of those things every night. From here, from where you are, it is magnificent. And it is, in the most literal sense, desolate. And somehow, both together, it is a comfort. Long before there were ice ages, before the continents had settled into their current shapes, before the first forests, or the first fish, or the first creature to crawl from water to land, the Earth's tilt was uncertain. The planet spins on an axis. That axis is tilted currently at about 23 degrees from vertical, and that tilt is what gives the Earth its seasons. The northern hemisphere leans toward the sun in summer, away from it in winter. The southern hemisphere does the opposite. Life on Earth has organized itself entirely around this rhythm. But without the Moon, that tilt would not stay stable. Mars, which has no large moon, wobbles on its axis dramatically over millions of years. Its tilt, shifting enough to fundamentally change its climate over geological time. Earth, held by its large, nearby moon, does not wobble this way. The Moon's gravity steadies the planet's lean, keeping the tilt within a relatively narrow range, keeping the seasons recognizable, keeping the climate within the bounds that allowed life to slowly, gently complexify over billions of years. The Moon is, in a sense that is both scientific and quietly astonishing, the reason the seasons exist in the form that shaped every living thing on Earth. The reason there is a spring, the reason there is a harvest, The reason poets have always had winter and summer to write about. It held the world still enough for life to find its footing. It has been doing that, without acknowledgement, the entire time. On the moon, shadows have no grey in them. On Earth, shadows are soft things full of scattered light, bounced off walls and clouds, and the diffuse brightness of a sky that distributes sunlight in all directions before it reaches the ground. You can read in shadow. You can see someone's face in shadow. Shadow on Earth is simply a region of less light, not the absence of it. On the moon, without an atmosphere to scatter anything, shadows are absolute. Where sunlight falls, it falls with full intensity, harsh, white, unfiltered by any intervening air. Where it does not fall, there is nothing, not dim light, not ambient glow, nothing. The line between sunlight and shadow on the moon is a clean, hard edge, the most precise boundary in that landscape. On one side, rock illuminated at full solar intensity. On the other, darkness that the eye cannot penetrate at all. Astronauts reported that reaching into a shadow felt psychologically strange, not dangerous, but somehow startling. The hand would simply disappear, not become hard to see, disappear, into a darkness that, on Earth, you would only find inside a sealed room with no light source at all. The moon has been drawing this precise line across its own surface, slowly rotating through its long day, for billions of years. The line moves, as all shadow lines do, but it moves slowly enough that watching it would feel like watching the minute hand of a clock, steady and quiet and exact. If you were standing on the moon right now, suited and still, looking out at the surface, you would feel, in your body, something unfamiliar. Not pain, not discomfort, something lighter than that. Something your body might spend a moment searching for a word to describe before settling, perhaps, on the word buoyant. The moon's gravity is 1/6 of Earth's, which means that everything you carry, the weight of your limbs, the pressure of your own body on the soles of your feet, the subtle downward pull that you have felt every moment of your life, without ever once noticing it, would be reduced to 1/6 of what it always is. You would feel, in some approximate and embodied way, like a dream of yourself, present but lightly, there but not pressed down. The Apollo astronauts, despite their training, could not quite prepare for this feeling. They moved differently than expected, not in the slow, deliberate way they had practiced, but in a kind of loping, low-gravity joy that the footage captured perfectly, bouncing slightly on landing, floating for a half-second between steps, rediscovering, with every footfall, that the ground was not holding them as firmly as the ground at home. Gravity is so constant here that we stop feeling it. It becomes the background against which everything else is felt. The moon offers a glimpse of what that background actually weighs by briefly, gently, lifting most of it away. You are being held right now, more firmly than you usually notice. And there is, if you choose to feel it, something reassuring in that. Somewhere below you right now, deep inside the moon, there is a core. Small, by the standards of planetary cores, much smaller, relative to the moon's size, than Earth's core is relative to Earth's, roughly the size of a modest country, if you tried to place it on a map, made of iron, most likely with some nickel mixed in, and some lighter elements that scientists are still working to identify with precision. And it is not entirely cold, not entirely still. A portion of it, the outer layer, may still be slightly molten, slowly losing the heat it has carried since the moon formed from that ancient collision. Not hot in the way Earth's core is hot, quieter, cooler, winding down across geological time towards something like stillness. No one has ever seen it. The instruments left by the Apollo missions gave scientists their first real hints of its existence. Vibrations from moonquakes that traveled through the interior and arrived at the seismometers carrying information about what they had passed through, like pressing your ear to the ground and listening to the shape of what you can't see. The moon keeps its center private, Scientists know it is there. They have good reason to believe what it is made of. But some of the details remain genuinely uncertain, not because no one has looked, but because some questions require instruments we have not yet built, or visits we have not yet made. At the center of that quiet silver world in your sky, something ancient rests, still partly warm, not yet entirely finished. There is a number that keeps appearing in the sky, and no one put it there. The sun is roughly 400 times wider than the moon, and the moon is roughly 400 times closer to Earth than the Sunday. These two facts, one about size, one about distance, cancel each other out so precisely that from where you stand on the surface of this planet, the sun and the moon appear to be exactly the same size. Not approximately the same, not similar enough to compare. The same, disk against disk, edge against edge. They match with an accuracy that allows something extraordinary. When the moon passes directly in front of the sun, it covers it completely and only barely. The dark circle of the moon fits over the bright circle of the sun, the way a coin placed on a drawing covers it exactly, leaving only a thin ring of fire around the edge. The solar corona, the sun's outer atmosphere, a faint and ghostly halo that is otherwise lost in the sun's own brightness, becomes visible. Only then, only because the fit is so precise. This coincidence is not written into any law of physics. It is not required by mathematics. It is simply the particular arrangement of this particular moon at this particular distance around this particular planet, at this particular moment in cosmic time. And it will not last. As the moon drifts slowly away, the match will gradually stop being exact. Total solar eclipses, as they exist now, this precise, perfect covering, are something only this era of Earth's history gets to have. You are living in the window. You always have been. Every civilization that has ever existed has looked at the same moon. Not a similar moon. Not a moon that looked roughly like this one. The same moon, at the same distance, showing the same face, moving through the same phases in the same patient cycle. The Sumerians looked at it. The people who built Stonehenge oriented their stones toward it. The astronomers of ancient China tracked its movements with instruments of careful wood and bronze. The poets of the Tang dynasty wrote about its light on still water. The navigators of the Pacific used its position to cross thousands of miles of open ocean without landmarks of any kind. Every child who has ever been carried outside on a clear night and shown the sky has seen it. Every sailor who has ever felt lost has looked for it. Every person who has ever sat by a window in the small hours, unable to sleep, has found it there. The moon is the single most universally witnessed object in human history. Not a painting, which requires proximity. Not a text, which requires literacy. Not a story, which requires transmission. Just the sky, available to anyone who looks up, in any language, in any century, on any continent. There is a kind of community in this that does not require anything of you. You did not have to join it. You were born into it. Every human who has ever lived is part of the same long, quiet looking. Tonight, you are simply the most recent person to take a turn. The sun is always shining on the moon. That seems like a strange thing to say, because the moon has phases. It waxes and wanes, thins to a crescent, disappears entirely for a night or two, and then slowly rounds again into fullness. But the phases are not about how much of the moon is lit. They are about how much of the lit portion we can see from Earth, depending on where the moon is in its orbit. The moon itself is always half in sunlight and half in darkness. Always. The terminator, the line between day and night on the lunar surface, sweeps slowly across the face we see. And that sweeping is what we call the phases. But behind it, beyond the edge of what we see, the sun continues its work. Light continues to fall on rock. The solar wind continues to touch the surface. What changes is our angle of view. What changes is how much of that illuminated half is turned toward us. And yet this simple fact that the moon is always partly in sunlight, always partly lit, always carrying both light and shadow simultaneously carries something worth sitting with. Nothing is entirely in the dark. Not for long. The night side of the moon is always moving toward its own dawn, in the slow rotation of its long, unhurried day. The moon has no word for hopeless. It only has phases, and phases, by definition, always continue. In a laboratory at several observatories around the world, there are instruments aimed at a specific set of reflectors on the moon's surface. These reflectors, flat panels, covered in small corner cube prisms, designed to bounce light directly back in the direction it came from, were left on the lunar surface during the Apollo missions. They have been there since 1969. They are still used regularly tonight by scientists who fire a brief laser pulse at the moon and measure how long it takes for the light to return. The round trip takes roughly 2.5 seconds. From that measurement, scientists can calculate the exact distance to the moon at any given moment, not approximately, not to within a few miles, but to within a few millimeters. It is one of the most precise distance measurements in science. These measurements are how we know the moon is drifting away, how we track the tiny annual increase in distance with confidence, how we monitor the subtle variations in the moon's orbit caused by the gravitational pulls of the sun and other planets. The mirrors have been sitting on the surface for more than 50 years. They are dusty now, covered in a fine layer of lunar regolith that has reduced their reflectivity over the decades, but they still work. A laser pulse fired from Earth tonight will still find them, still bounce back, still carry information about the distance between two worlds. Something left behind is still, quietly, in conversation with home. On the moon, a single day lasts as long as an entire Earth month. The moon rotates very slowly, one full turn for every orbit it makes around the Earth. This is the same tidal locking that keeps one face perpetually toward us, and it means that a point on the moon's equator experiences roughly 2 weeks of continuous sunlight, followed by roughly 2 weeks of continuous darkness, followed by 2 weeks of sunlight again. 1 day, 1 night, 1 month. During the lunar day, temperatures climb to levels that would be dangerous to human skin, the surface heating steadily in direct, unfiltered sunlight with no atmosphere to moderate it. During the lunar night, temperatures drop to a cold, so extreme it would freeze almost any material we use in ordinary life. And the transition between the two, the lunar dawn, the lunar dusk, happens so slowly that you could watch it for an hour and see only the very first, very faint change in the angle of light on the rock. Think of the quality of light in early morning, just after the sun has cleared the horizon, that particular long, golden, sideways light that makes everything cast long shadows and look somehow more significant than it does at midday. On the moon, that quality of light lasts for days. The sun rises so slowly that an entire Earth week might pass before it fully clears the horizon. An eternal golden hour, stretched across stone and silence, beautiful in a way that no one is there to see. On nights when there is no moon in the sky, when the new moon has taken the night's light with it, leaving the sky as dark as it gets, something happens to the darkness. It deepens, it opens. The stars, which on moonlit nights are visible but politely restrained, step forward. The Milky Way, that long, soft, slightly irregular band of light that is the combined glow of hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy's disk, becomes visible to the naked eye, in a way it almost never is in the presence of any other light source. And what it looks like, to someone who has not seen it from a truly dark sky, is startling. Not a thin line, not a faint smear. A structure, a wide, luminous river of light, with visible density variations. Darker lanes where dust clouds block the stars behind them. Brighter regions where the stellar population is thicker and older. You are inside it when you see it. The Milky Way is not something you are looking at from outside. You are a small point on one of its spiral arms, looking inward and outward simultaneously, seeing the accumulated light of your galaxy from within. The moon's absence makes this visible, which means the moon, even when it is gone, shapes what you can see. Its disappearance is itself a kind of gift, a clearing of the foreground so that something vastly further away can come through. Absence, in the right circumstance, reveals. The temperature on the moon swings across a single slow day, from the heat of an oven to the cold of deep space. In full sunlight, the surface reaches temperatures that would boil water in an open pan. Not warm, not hot, the kind of heat that belongs in an industrial context that would be described in a safety briefing. And then, as the long lunar night begins, and it begins slowly, the sun setting across days rather than minutes, the temperature drops and continues to drop and keeps dropping through a night that lasts 2 full Earth weeks until it reaches temperatures colder than any place on Earth's surface, colder than the high Antarctic plateau in winter, approaching the cold of the space between stars. The same rock, the same crater rim, the same grain of ancient dust, heated beyond boiling, then cooled to something near absolute in the same monthly cycle, over and over, for 4.5 billion years. And yet the rock does not shatter. It does not crack and crumble, as you might expect. Slowly, across geological time, it does break down. The constant thermal stress is one of the things that, over vast spans of time, helps grind the surface into that fine silver dust. But slowly, patiently, across timescales that make a human life feel like a single breath, the moon endures its own extremes without drama, without complaint. It simply continues through them, from one state to the other and back again, following the same patient rhythm it has always followed. There is a kind of equanimity in that, if you choose to see it. Imagine the darkest night you have ever known. Not a power outage in a city, where ambient light from 100 sources still fills the sky with a faint orange glow. Not a cloudy night in the countryside, where at least the clouds themselves hold a kind of grey. A genuinely dark night, the kind that exists only far from any human settlement, in deserts or on open water, or at the tops of mountains, where the air is thin and clear, and nothing interrupts the view to the horizon in any direction. Now remove the moon. Without the moon, on a clear night, far from any artificial light, darkness would reach the ground. Not metaphorically, literally. The starlight, faint and beautiful as it is, would cast shadows you could actually see on pale sand or snow. The difference between the ground and the sky would become a matter of what you were looking at rather than how bright it was. For almost all of human history, and for all of animal history before that, darkness like this was the default. Night meant the absence of almost everything. The moon was not a nice feature of the sky. It was, on many nights, the difference between being able to see and not being able to see at all. Every creature that has ever moved at night has done so with or without the moon's permission. It structured safety. It structured hunting. It structured the simple act of finding the path back home. The moon has been a practical, bodily, immediate part of life on this planet for as long as there has been life with eyes to use. When the Apollo astronauts returned to Earth from the moon, something unexpected happened in their bodies. The moment they re-entered Earth's atmosphere, before they had even splashed down, before anyone had opened the hatch or handed them anything, they began to feel heavy. Not dramatically, not painfully, but in a newly noticeable way. The gravity of Earth, which every one of them had lived with for their entire lives, without ever consciously feeling it, suddenly registered. The weight of their own arms, the pressure of the seat against their backs, the subtle effort of holding their heads upright. A few days on the moon in gravity, 1/6 of what they had always known had recalibrated something in them, had made the background legible, had shown them the weight they carried by briefly relieving them of it. This is one of the quieter and more affecting things the moon has ever done to a human body. Not through its gravity pulling on them from a distance, but by providing an absence of gravity into which they stepped, and from which they returned, different, if only for a few hours in their sense of what the word heavy meant. You carry the same weight they were feeling. You are carrying it right now, pressed gently into whatever surface is holding you, pulled toward the center of the earth with a force that has been acting on you every moment of your life. Steady, constant, so familiar it has no name until you think about it. Somewhere on the surface of the moon, there is a crater named Plato. Not far from it, there is one named Copernicus, and Tycho, and Kepler. And farther out, across the plains and highlands and ancient lava fields, the names continue: Aristotle, Pythagoras, Hypatia, Marie Curie, Yuri Gagarin. The entire surface of the moon is quietly covered in the names of people who spent their lives trying to understand the universe. Philosophers and mathematicians, astronomers who worked by candlelight, scientists who were told their ideas were wrong and turned out to be right. The International Astronomical Union maintains the naming conventions, a body of scientists who decide, with careful deliberation, which names belong on which features. It is a slow, considered process, a Formula 1, and the result, accumulated over centuries of sky watching and map making, is that the moon's surface has become a kind of monument to human curiosity itself. Every crater is a question someone asked. Every named plain is a life devoted to looking upward. The Sea of Tranquility is named for a quality, the Ocean of Storms for a feeling, the Bay of Rainbows for something purely beautiful, with no scientific justification required. When you look at the moon, you are looking at a map of what human beings have valued. Not power, mostly. Not conquest, mostly. Thought, mostly the patient, devoted, lifelong act of trying to understand where we are and what surrounds us. The moon carries our intellectual history on its face. It always has, very slowly, across timescales that dwarf every civilization and every species and every geological era since life began. The Earth is spinning down, not stopping, not dramatically slowing in any way you could measure across a human lifetime, or 1,000 of them. But the Earth's rotation is being gently, continuously braked by the moon's gravity. The same tidal forces that move the oceans also create a tiny friction that transfers a small amount of Earth's rotational energy to the moon's orbit, causing the moon to drift outward and the Earth's day to grow, fractionally longer. In the time of the early Earth, before complex life, before oceans in their current form, in the first billion years after the moon formed, a day on Earth lasted somewhere around 6 hours. The planet spun faster. The moon was closer. The tides were enormous. The whole system was younger and less settled. Now, a day lasts 24 hours, and it will continue to lengthen, year by year, by a tiny fraction of a second per century. Not enough to notice. Not enough to matter in any practical sense, across any time frame a human mind can comfortably hold. But the moon has been lengthening your days, gently, for billions of years. Every day you have ever lived has been slightly longer than the days lived by the creatures that came before you. The moon gave you more time. It has always been giving you more time. Before the Apollo astronauts left the moon for the last time, they attached instruments, collected samples, and said whatever final words felt right for the moment. Then, at some point during those last hours on the surface, one of them leaned down and picked up a handful of lunar dust. Not for science, not for a sample container, just to feel it for a moment in a gloved hand, knowing that the next breath of anything familiar was still 250,000 miles away. Later, in the lunar module, and then in the command module on the way home, they noticed something unexpected about that dust. It had a smell. Not a neutral smell, a specific one, sharp and a little acrid, something like spent gunpowder, the chemical signature of a material that had been exposed to the solar wind and cosmic radiation for billions of years, without ever being washed or weathered or touched by anything. A smell that exists nowhere on Earth because nothing on Earth has been kept this way. Scientists think the smell comes from the surface chemistry of the regolith, the way the particles are fractured and reactive, bonding instantly with moisture and oxygen the moment they encounter any. On the Moon, they are simply what they are. When they meet the air inside a spacecraft, they react, and that reaction is what the astronauts smelled. It is the scent of undisturbed time. 4.5 billion years of stillness, briefly introduced to the air of the world it had never met. A smell that no rain has ever diluted, that no wind has ever carried away. There is a region on the Moon's surface called Mare Imbrium, the Sea of Rains. It is not a sea. It has never held water in any form that pooled or moved or supported anything living. It is a vast, flat plain of ancient solidified lava, dark and quiet, formed when a massive impact billions of years ago punched through the lunar crust and allowed the molten interior to flood outward across the surface in slow, enormous sheets. The lava cooled. Over millions of years, it settled. It was struck by smaller meteorites that left their own smaller craters across its face. Slowly, over hundreds of millions of years, it accumulated its thin covering of powdered regolith, and then it simply rested. The Sea of Rains has been resting since before there were fish on Earth. When you look at the Moon with the naked eye and see those dark patches that the ancients thought were actual seas, they were wrong about the water, but they were responding to something real. Those plains are different from the highlands. They are lower, smoother, darker, quieter. They have a quality of settled stillness that the cratered highlands don't quite have. They are places where violence happened long ago and then completely finished, where the evidence of upheaval was covered, slowly, by the very material the upheaval released, where what remains is calm. Old turmoil becomes still. It happens in rock. It happens in other things too. Something happens to the human eye in full moonlight. The Moon provides enough light to see by, to walk without stumbling, to make out the shapes of trees and roads and buildings, to find your way along a familiar path. But it does not provide enough light to see color. Color vision in humans requires a certain minimum light intensity to activate the cone cells in the retina, the cells that distinguish red from green from blue. Below that threshold, the eye defaults to its rod cells, which are far more sensitive to low light, but register only brightness, not hue. In full moonlight, you are almost exactly at that threshold, which means the world in full moonlight becomes something neither fully colorful nor fully gray, a soft, uncertain landscape that the brain fills in partly with memory and partly with the available information, producing an experience somewhere between seeing and imagining. The world looks like a painting of itself, familiar in shape, uncertain in tone, silver where it should be green, pale where it should be warm, the shadows deeper than you expect, the light on still water almost too bright to look at directly. Every person who has ever walked outside on a full moon night has been in this state, suspended between two modes of seeing, their eyes doing their patient best with what the reflected light of a distant star provides, second-hand and gentle and just barely enough. The Moon has always given just enough, not too much, just enough. For thousands of years before written history, and through all the centuries of written history after, human beings have looked at the Moon and divided time by it. The word month comes by a long and wandering path through Old English and Germanic languages, from the same root as the word moon. The moon was the month. They were not separate concepts that happened to align. They were the same thing, named once, used for everything. The earliest calendars we know of are lunar, notched bones from Africa, tens of thousands of years old, that some archaeologists believe track the phases of the moon. The first way anyone kept count of time was by watching that silver light thin and thicken in the sky above them, and carving a mark for each change. Before anyone counted years reliably, before the solar calendar was understood and adopted, the moon was how you knew when to plant, when to harvest, when to travel, when to hold a ceremony, when to expect a birth, when a debt was due. It was the clock and the calendar simultaneously, hanging in the sky for everyone to consult. Many calendars still work this way. The Islamic calendar is purely lunar. The Hebrew calendar and the Chinese calendar blend lunar and solar rhythms, honoring both. The dates of Easter and Ramadan and Diwali all still shift with the moon's patient cycling. The moon has been organizing human life quietly for longer than any institution, any language, any nation. It was the first shared system, the first thing everyone agreed on. The far side of the moon, the side that has never faced Earth, that no human eye ever directly saw, until the space age is not simply the mirror image of the side we know. It is older looking, more battered, covered in a denser layer of craters, which means fewer of the large impact basins that were later flooded with lava and became the smooth, dark plains visible on the near side. The far side is rougher, more ancient in its surface character, more marked by the early solar system's violence. Scientists are still working out precisely why the two sides differ so much. One possibility is that the near side, facing Earth, was kept slightly warmer by our planet's own radiated heat during the moon's formation, warm enough for the crust to stay thin enough that later, large impacts could punch through to the mantle below and trigger the lava, flooding that created the smooth plains. Another possibility involves differences in the distribution of heat-generating radioactive elements in the lunar interior. The answer may be some combination of both, or something not yet fully proposed. The point is that the moon has a face we know and a face we don't. A side that has been in constant dialogue with Earth since the beginning, and a side that has been quietly turned away, accumulating its own history, wearing its own particular scars, known only since we built machines that could go around and look. Even things that feel completely familiar have a side we haven't seen yet. Take a slow breath, if you like. The air that moves through you right now is the same air that has been cycling through this planet's atmosphere for billions of years, breathed by creatures you would not recognize, moved by weather systems that no one named, held in the lungs of animals whose fossils are still buried in places no one has yet looked. Now consider that while all of that was happening, all of that breathing, and living, and dying, and cycling, the moon was watching, not with intent, not with awareness, as far as anyone can know, but present, there in the sky above every living thing that has ever drawn breath on this planet, from the first simple organisms in the first warm seas, to the person breathing softly right now. In this room, in this body, following this quiet voice, the moon has been a witness to the entire story of life on Earth. It was there when the first complex cells formed. It was there when the first creatures moved onto land. It was there through every extinction, every flourishing, every ice age and every thaw. And through all of it, it simply continued its orbit, its phases, its patient, faithful cycling, without requiring that any of it turn out a particular way, without having any preference for any outcome. The universe has been going on for a very long time without needing anything in particular to happen. That includes tonight. That includes you, exactly as you are. Of all the words that have ever been used to describe a part of the moon, perhaps none is more quietly perfect than the one chosen for the place where humans first landed. The Sea of Tranquility, Mare Tranquillitatis, in the Latin used for official astronomical nomenclature, named by astronomers in the 17th century who looked at that dark, still plane through early telescopes and reached, as people always reach when confronted with something that affects them, for the word that described what they felt, not what they saw, what they felt. They saw a flat, featureless plain of dark rock. They felt tranquility. And it was to that specifically named place, that particular quiet plain, chosen partly for its flatness and its relatively low risk of boulders and craters, that the first human beings to land on another world guided their spacecraft. as if the name were not just descriptive but prescriptive, as if the moon had, centuries before the event, quietly labeled the place where it was willing to receive visitors. Tranquility. The word comes from the Latin tranquillus, calm, still, undisturbed. It is not a dramatic word. It does not reach for grandeur. It asks only for the absence of disturbance, the presence of stillness, the quality of a surface that has settled into itself. The moon has that quality in abundance. It has been offering it from wherever it sits in your sky tonight, every night of your life. Somewhere on the moon, in the permanent shadow at the bottom of a crater near the South Pole, there is water, not liquid, not flowing or pooling or catching light the way water does when you think of it. Frozen, locked into the regolith in patches of ice that have not seen sunlight in billions of years, sheltered by crater walls tall enough and steep enough that the sun's light has never reached the floor below. These are called permanently shadowed regions, and in them, temperatures stay so consistently cold that water ice, once deposited, simply stays. It does not sublimate into the vacuum the way it would on an exposed surface. It does not melt, because there is no warmth to melt it. It simply remains, patient and crystalline, in a darkness more complete than any darkness on Earth. Scientists believe some of this water arrived on comets, ancient travelers from the outer solar system, made largely of ice and dust that struck the young moon and left their water behind. Some may have been released by volcanic activity in the moon's early life. The exact proportions are still being worked out, carefully, by instruments sent to orbit, and eventually, perhaps, to land in those cold, dark places. There is water on the moon, ancient water, comet water, possibly water that formed in the outer solar system billions of years ago, traveled inward, struck a world, and stayed. Water that has been waiting, quietly frozen, since before any ocean existed on Earth. It has been there, all this time, still, patient, cold beyond imagining, and entirely undisturbed. Something shifts in the chest when a human being looks at a photograph of Earth taken from the moon. You have probably seen one. The image, called Earthrise, taken by astronaut William Anders during the Apollo 8 mission in 1968, shows Earth rising above the moon's grey horizon, a small, intensely colored sphere against absolute blackness. Blue and white and faintly green, vivid and alive in a way that nothing else in the frame even begins to approach. Anders later said that they had gone to explore the moon, and what they discovered was the Earth. That photograph and the others taken during the Apollo missions, including the full disk image, called the blue marble, changed something in the way humanity understood itself. Not everyone, not immediately, not completely, but something shifted. The environmental movement gained force in the years following those images. The first Earth Day was held in 1970. The sense that Earth was a single, shared, finite object, visible in its entirety, bordered by nothing but dark, became, for the first time, not an abstract concept, but a thing you could see. The moon gave us that. By being far enough away to turn around and look back from, it gave us the perspective that no amount of looking outward from Earth's surface could provide. You have to leave a thing to see it whole. The moon understood this, in its way, long before we did. The moon keeps its own schedule, and the schedule does not bend for anything. Every night, the moon rises at a time that is roughly 50 minutes later than it rose the night before. Not exactly 50 minutes, the elliptical nature of its orbit and the tilt of its path relative to the horizon introduce small variations. But approximately, reliably, patiently, 50 minutes later each evening, regardless of what is happening on the surface below. This means that for most of the month, the moon rises at a time that is inconvenient for watching it rise. Sometimes it comes up in the middle of the afternoon, already pale against a still bright sky. Sometimes it rises well after midnight, long after most people have gone to sleep. Only occasionally does it time itself to appear at dusk, dramatic and orange above the horizon, in the way that seems designed for human appreciation. It is not designed for human appreciation. It does not know we are here, watching. It follows its orbit, which follows its physics, which follows from conditions established 4.5 billion years ago. And yet, there is something deeply calming about a system that operates on its own terms, that does not adjust, that does not hurry or slow down in response to anything happening below. That simply continues, in its own time, at its own pace, indifferent in the most peaceful sense of the word. The moon is on its schedule. You are on yours. Tonight, perhaps, they have aligned just long enough to be restful. Before the Apollo missions, before any spacecraft had ever reached the moon, human beings calculated its distance from Earth, using nothing but mathematics and careful observation. The ancient Greek astronomer Hipparchus, working in the 2nd century BCE, used the geometry of a solar eclipse to estimate the moon's distance. By noting the different angles at which the eclipse appeared from different locations on Earth, he calculated without telescopes, without computers, with papyrus and geometry, and patient, repeated observation, a figure that was remarkably close to what we now know to be correct. He was working with shadows, with angles, with the fact that two observers at different latitudes see the same celestial event from slightly different positions, and that the difference between their views contains, hidden inside it, the geometry of the distances involved. He found the moon with his mind, reached across 250,000 miles of empty space using nothing but the consistency of mathematics and the patience of someone willing to measure the same thing from multiple places and compare what they found. There is something quietly wonderful about the fact that human beings have known, approximately, how far away the moon is for more than 2,000 years. That the knowledge did not require technology beyond careful eyes and a willingness to think. That the universe was always legible to anyone patient enough to read it. The moon was always within reach of the human mind, long before any rocket left the ground. On the lunar surface, in those permanently shadowed craters near the poles, there exists a quality of darkness that has no equivalent anywhere on Earth. Not the darkness of a room with the lights off, where your eyes adjust after a few minutes and shapes emerge. Not the darkness of a cave, where at least the rock itself is present and close and tactile. Not the darkness of a moonless night outdoors, where the sky still holds starlight and your feet still feel the ground. The darkness at the bottom of a permanently shadowed lunar crater is total and cold, and has been continuous for billions of years. No photon of sunlight has ever reached those floors. The stars are visible. The crater is open to the sky above, but they provide almost nothing to see by. The walls rise steeply around a floor that has been in this same unchanging night since long before Earth had anything living on it. It is the oldest ongoing darkness in the inner solar system. Darkness like this is usually associated with something ominous, but consider it differently, the way the moon itself invites you to, as a kind of preservation, as a steadiness, as a place where nothing has changed because nothing needed to, where the ice that arrived on ancient comets simply stayed, because nothing disturbed it, and the darkness that sheltered it continued without interruption. Sometimes, the deepest darkness is simply the most undisturbed place. Not frightening, just very, very old and very, very still. The moon is 400 times smaller than the sun and 400 times closer to Earth. You already know this. It was mentioned earlier in the context of eclipses, but there is another way to hold this fact that has nothing to do with eclipses at all. It means the moon and the sun have spent all of human history appearing identical in size, hanging in the same sky, visible sometimes simultaneously at dusk or dawn, and yet utterly different in nature. One, a roaring nuclear furnace converting millions of tons of hydrogen to helium every second. The other, a silent, airless, geologically quiet ball of ancient rock. One generating enough energy to sustain all life on Earth from 93 million miles away. the other reflecting a small fraction of that energy from 250,000 miles away, gently, just enough to read by on a clear night. Same apparent size, completely different, everything else. There is something almost parable-like in this. The thing that looks the same from a distance can be entirely different in nature. Appearance and reality diverge quietly, and the divergence is not always obvious until you know how far away each thing actually is. The moon has been teaching this lesson to anyone willing to notice it, for as long as there has been anyone to notice. Proximity changes everything. What looks equivalent from here may be, in reality, of entirely different scales of importance, temperature, and power. Look closer, when you can. Distance simplifies. The moon will outlast the Sunday. In roughly 5 billion years, the sun will exhaust the hydrogen fuel in its core and begin to expand slowly at first, then more dramatically into what astronomers call a red giant. It will grow large enough to engulf the inner planets. Earth, in most models, will not survive this expansion. The oceans will boil away. The atmosphere will be stripped. Whatever remains of the planet will be absorbed into the expanding outer layers of a dying star. The moon, in the same models, may be ejected from Earth's orbit as the sun's mass loss changes the gravitational dynamics of the solar system. It will not be destroyed. It will simply become untethered, a small, dark, airless world, drifting into an orbit around the sun, alone, a remnant, a survivor. And after the sun has faded through its red giant phase, collapsed into a white dwarf, and slowly cooled across billions of years toward a dark cinder, the moon will still be there, orbiting, patient, unchanged in any way that would be visible. The moon is more permanent than the sun, in the long view, more permanent than the system that made it. This is not a sad thought, held the right way. It is simply an honest one. The universe keeps things longer than we expect, and discards things sooner. The moon will continue, long past any concern of ours. It will be fine. It has always been fine. 12 human beings have walked on the moon. 12. The number is worth holding for a moment, not as a statistic, but as a fact about individual people. 12 specific people, with names and families and favorite foods and things that worried them at night, who traveled to another world and came back changed. 12 sets of footprints. 12 sets of eyes that looked up at Earth from a surface that was not Earth. The last of them was a geologist named Harrison Schmitt, who stepped off the lunar surface in December 1972, climbed back into the lunar module, and became the last human being to have stood on another world. He is still alive. He has been living on Earth, under Earth's gravity, under Earth's sky, since that December day more than 50 years ago. The moon has had no human visitors since. This is not, primarily, a fact about failure or loss. It is a fact about how rare and deliberate and effortful that visiting was, and how long the gap between extraordinary things can be. 12 people have stood there. Every other human being, every person who has ever lived, before or since, has looked at the moon from here, from this surface, from this side of the distance. You are in the vast, quiet company of everyone who has ever looked up. And those 12 are in a company of their own, small and extraordinary and permanent. Both are real kinds of connection to the same place. The moon has a name for a place that sounds like it was chosen specifically for falling asleep beside. Mare Serenitatis, the Sea of Serenity. It sits in the northern part of the lunar near side, adjacent to the Sea of Tranquility, a broad and quiet plain of ancient dark lava that has been still since long before anything on Earth had a spine. Named by the same 17th century astronomers who named the other lunar seas, it carries in its Latin syllables the same quality of feeling over description, of emotional truth over literal accuracy. Serenitas, the Latin word for serenity, for the quality of being undisturbed, for a kind of calm that is not the absence of everything, but the presence of stillness. a word that originally described clear skies. A sky without cloud, without storm, without anything between the observer and the stars. The Sea of Serenity has no weather. It has no sky in the sense the Latin intended, because it has no atmosphere for clouds to form in. But it has something that the word's origins were reaching toward, a place where nothing disturbs the view, where nothing intervenes between the surface and the deep. It is one of the places on the moon that is simply, unchangingly, itself. Dark plain, scattered craters, ancient rock, eternal silence. A sea named for the quality it holds most completely, and holds it still, right now, in the sky above you. The oldest object most people will ever be near, without knowing it, is moonlight. Not the moon itself, which is inaccessible to almost everyone, but the light it reflects. The photons that left the sun 8 minutes ago struck the ancient surface of the moon and arrived at your window. Those photons, in traveling to the moon, touched rock that formed 4.5 billion years ago. Rock that was present before Earth had continents, before Earth had oceans, before any biological process had begun, the long, slow work of making the planet habitable. The Apollo astronauts brought samples of this rock back to Earth. Some of those samples are now in museums, behind glass, in climate-controlled rooms, attended by curators who handle them in gloves. They are among the most carefully preserved objects in human custody, older than any fossil, older than any mineral found on Earth's restless surface, older than almost anything a human hand has ever held. And moonlight has been touching rock like that, and bouncing back to Earth, and landing on human faces, every night, for as long as there have been humans. Every time you have ever stood in moonlight, you were receiving light that had just touched something older than this world's oceans, older than the first cell, older than the atmosphere you are breathing right now. Ancient light, arriving fresh each night, carrying nothing of its age in its appearance, gentle on the skin, cool, just enough. The moon has a pulse, not a heartbeat, nothing so biological, but a rhythm, regular and deep, that moves through its interior the way a slow wave moves through still water when something distant disturbs it. Moonquakes. The moon experiences them, as the Earth experiences earthquakes, though the mechanisms differ and the character is entirely its own. Some moonquakes originate deep in the interior, in regions scientists are still working to fully understand. Others happen closer to the surface, triggered by the daily thermal stress of moving from the extreme cold of lunar night into the intense heat of lunar day, the rock expanding and contracting, slowly, at the boundary between shadow and light. And some moonquakes, the ones that most surprised the scientists monitoring the Apollo seismometers, last for an hour, sometimes longer. On Earth, an earthquake lasts seconds, perhaps a minute in extreme cases. The energy dissipates quickly through rock, saturated with water, and softened by geological activity. The moon's interior is dry and cold and rigid. Energy introduced into it does not dissipate quickly. It reverberates. It rings, the way a bell rings slowly, deeply, for far longer than you expect. The moon rings like a bell when struck. Scientists discovered this quality in the data from the Apollo seismometers and have been thinking about what it means ever since. What it means for the moon's internal structure, what it says about what is down there, dry and cold and resonant, something that quiet can still carry a note a very long time. Hold your hand up toward the moon on a clear night and close one eye. Your thumb, at arm's length, covers it completely. This is not a trick of perception or a flaw in scale. It is simply what it means for the moon to be the particular size it is, at the particular distance. It is close enough to feel present, far enough to be covered by a thumb. Every total solar eclipse works by the same ratio. The moon, at arm's length from your eye, is just thumb-sized. The sun, vastly larger but vastly farther, is also just thumb-sized from here. The match between them is so exact that when the moon passes in front of the sun, It covers it with the same completeness that your thumb covers the moon on a quiet night. During a total solar eclipse, day becomes night in seconds. Stars appear, the temperature drops, birds go quiet. Animals that were active become still, briefly uncertain what has happened to the light. And in the sky, where the sun should be, there is instead a black circle rimmed with the ghostly corona, the sun's outer atmosphere, usually invisible, now revealed by the precise fit of a moon-sized shadow. People travel thousands of miles to stand in the path of totality. They plan for years. They describe the experience afterward in terms that reach for words like reverent and altered and more than I expected. All of it made possible by a coincidence of size and distance that no physics required. That simply is. Somewhere in a box in a museum, or in a university archive, or in a private collection, there is a clay tablet pressed with cuneiform marks that record the phases of the moon. The people who made it did not think of themselves as doing astronomy. They were doing something practical, tracking time, planning ceremonies, managing agriculture, predicting when the month would end and a new one begin. The moon was not a scientific object to them. It was the calendar, the clock, the organizing principle of shared time. Lunar records exist in almost every ancient culture with writing. Babylonian astronomers predicted lunar eclipses with remarkable accuracy using purely observational records. No theory of gravity, no understanding of orbits, just the patient accumulation of data across generations, handed down and refined, and handed down again. They noticed that eclipses repeat on a cycle of roughly 18 years and 11 days, a period now called the Saros cycle. They could predict eclipses using this pattern alone, without understanding why it worked. The pattern was real. The sky was consistent. The moon did the same things at the same intervals, and careful people wrote it down. This is, in its way, one of the oldest sciences. Watching the same thing, reliably, over time, and trusting what the repetition reveals. The moon taught human beings to trust pattern, to believe that the future resembles the past in certain specific ways, to find comfort in the predictable return of something reliable. That is not a small gift. That is, in many ways, the beginning of science. Astronauts who slept inside their spacecraft on the surface of the moon reported something unexpected in the hours before sleep. The module creaked, not loudly, not alarmingly, a quiet, irregular series of pops and ticks and small structural sounds, the spacecraft adjusting to the temperature change as the lunar surface around it cooled with the slow approach of lunar night, or warmed as the long day continued. Metal contracting, joints settling, the same sounds a house makes at night when the temperature drops, translated into the language of an aluminum spacecraft on an airless world. It was, the astronauts said later, oddly comforting. In the profound silence of the lunar surface, silence more complete than anything they had ever experienced, those small sounds of the structure around them were a reminder that they were not alone, that something human-made was present and responding to its environment, that the world they had brought with them was still there. A house settles at night because it is adjusting to the cooling air. Your walls and floors and ceilings expand and contract with temperature, and the sounds they make are the sounds of a structure adapting to where it is. If you hear sounds like that tonight, the quiet language of a building finding its equilibrium in the dark, you are hearing something the Apollo astronauts heard too, translated into the extraordinary context of another world. The sounds of shelter, the sounds of something holding. When no moon is visible in the night sky, when the new moon has taken its light away and left only stars, the ocean still responds. The tides continue. The water still rises toward the place in the sky where the moon is, even though no light marks that place, even though from the surface the moon is invisible. The ocean does not need to see the moon. It feels it. This is worth sitting with. The moon exerts its gravitational influence whether it is visible or not, whether it is above the horizon or below it. Whether the sky is clear or covered in clouds or thick with storm, the pull continues regardless of observation, regardless of acknowledgement, regardless of whether anyone on the surface is aware of it. 2 tides a day, every day, in every ocean on the planet. High water following the moon, low water falling as it passes. The rhythm maintained with a consistency that has not varied in any meaningful way since the oceans first gathered on this planet's surface. You cannot see the moon right now. Perhaps it has set, or it is new, or the clouds have covered it. But if you are near the ocean, the water near you is still responding to it, rising and falling in its patient, twice daily breath, pulled by a presence that requires no visibility to act. Influence does not require presence. Care does not always require being seen. The moon tends the ocean in the dark, just as faithfully as in the light. Long before the far side of the moon was photographed, human beings invented it. Writers and artists and dreamers, confronted with a face that always turned away, with a hemisphere that no eye had ever seen and no instrument could yet reach, filled the absence with imagination. The far side was the location, in various stories, of hidden civilizations, of alien installations, of the answer to questions the near side couldn't hold. It was not any of those things. When the Soviet spacecraft Lunar 3 swung around the moon in 1959 and sent back the first blurred, grainy photographs of the far side, what it revealed was more cratered, more rugged, more ancient-looking than the side we knew, but not mysterious in any of the ways imagination had suggested, just older, more marked, more itself. There is a particular kind of comfort in this, though it is not the obvious kind. The imagination had populated the unknown with extraordinary things. The reality was simply more moon, more rock, more silence, more ancient surface, more of exactly what the moon is. The far side turned out to be continuous with the near side, not a different world hiding behind a familiar face. The same world, fully itself on both sides, whether we could see it or not. Things that are hidden are often simply more of what they already are. The unknown is frequently not stranger than the known, just less seen. The moon appears in the oldest cave paintings we have found. Or, more precisely, what may be the moon appears there: crescent shapes, circular marks, sequences of lines that some archaeologists interpret as lunar phase tallies, pressed into clay or drawn with pigment on cave walls tens of thousands of years ago, by people who had not yet developed writing, who had not yet settled into agricultural communities, who were still following herds across landscapes that no longer exist. We cannot be certain. The interpretation of ancient marks is always careful, always provisional, always aware that we are looking across an enormous gulf of time and culture and meaning. What we see as a moon symbol may have meant something entirely different to the person who drew it. But the shapes are there, and the moon was there, and the most ancient record keepers we know of were watching the sky, counting something, marking something, paying attention to something overhead with enough regularity and enough purpose that it seemed worth preserving in pigment on stone. Art and astronomy began in the same place, at the same time, for the same reason, because something in the sky moved people enough to want to hold it still. The moon was the first subject. The rock face was the first canvas. The mark was the first attempt to keep something that kept moving. In the thin, barely there exosphere of the moon, one of the elements drifting in ghostly isolation is sodium. The same element that makes table salt what it is. The same element that makes a candle flame glow faintly yellow when salt is held in it. The same element that is essential to the electrical signaling of every nerve in your body, the mechanism by which a thought travels from one neuron to another, by which sensation reaches the brain, by which the decision to breathe happens thousands of times each night without your awareness. The moon's atmosphere contains sodium, not much a scattering of individual atoms, far too sparse to detect with the naked eye, carried into the exosphere by the energetic processes that chip material off the surface and send it briefly skyward. but it is there. And it is, of all things, sodium. The same element that keeps your heart beating in its patient rhythm tonight. The same element that allows you to feel the warmth of the blanket, the weight of the pillow, the slow deepening of your breath as the body moves towards sleep. You and the moon share this. Not metaphorically, chemically. The universe tends to make the same things in the same processes and distribute them across vast distances, so that a lonely atom drifting above an airless world and a nerve signal crossing a synapse in a sleeping mind are, at the elemental level, made of the same stuff. The same stuff. Everywhere. All of it. Quietly. Continuous. Every living thing on Earth grew up under the moon. Not as a metaphor, as a biological fact. The organisms that first developed light-sensitive cells, the ancient ancestors of every eye that has ever existed, were responding to the available light in their environment. And the available light included the moon. Coral spawns by the full moon. Certain species coordinate their reproduction so precisely with lunar phases that researchers can predict spawning events to within hours, using nothing but the lunar calendar. Sea turtles navigate by moonlight. Dung beetles use the Milky Way and the moon together to orient themselves in straight lines across dark savanna. Some species of fish change their behavior measurably with each phase. The moon is not just a backdrop to life on Earth. It is woven into life, into the timing of reproduction, the coordination of migration, the architecture of behavior in creatures that have never had a thought about the sky. It is present in biology the way it is present in the tides, invisibly, reliably, shaping things from a distance without any of the things being shaped needing to know why. Your own sleep cycles, the rhythm of your waking and resting, evolved in a world where the moon was the primary source of nighttime light. Whether your body still responds to it is something researchers are actively studying, finding tentative evidence that sleep depth and duration shift slightly with the lunar cycle. The moon may be in your biology the way it is in the corals, quietly, below the level of any decision you have made about it. You did not choose the moon, but it may have helped shape you. The ground beneath a geologist's feet is always telling a story. But the ground beneath a geologist's feet on the moon would be telling a story of almost incomprehensible stillness, a record of the first billion years of the solar system, preserved without interruption, written in layers of impact and cooling lava and slow accumulation of dust. On Earth, the crust is constantly being recycled. Tectonic plates dive beneath each other, carrying old rock into the mantle where it melts and is remade. The oldest exposed rock on Earth's surface is roughly 4 billion years old, and finding it requires traveling to very specific, geologically quiet corners of very old continents. The moon has no plate tectonics. Nothing dives, nothing melts and resurfaces. The rock that formed early stays where it formed, accumulating craters, accumulating dust, accumulating the patient record of everything that has struck it from above. Geologists who study lunar samples describe a particular quality in handling them: the awareness, held carefully alongside the scientific analysis, that the rock in the dish has not been touched by geological processes since the solar system was new, that the last thing to significantly alter it was the impact that broke it from its parent formation billions of years ago. The moon is the solar system's memory, a place where the beginning is still visible, still intact, still available to anyone patient and resourceful enough to go and look. The beginning is still there, preserved in silence, waiting without urgency. There is a quality to tidal flats, those broad, wet, quietly breathing expanses of mud and shallow water that appear and disappear with the tides, that has no parallel in any inland landscape. They exist because of the moon, the regular flooding and draining of coastal lowlands, driven by the tidal rhythm, creates habitat that is neither fully ocean nor fully land, a transitional zone, neither one thing nor another, changing with every tide cycle, always in a state of patient becoming. These tidal flats are among the most biologically productive environments on Earth, filled with organisms adapted specifically to the rhythm of flooding and exposure. Rich with nutrients brought in by the tide and trapped in the mud. Visited by enormous numbers of migratory birds that travel thousands of miles to feed there. And some evolutionary biologists believe that tidal environments like these, shallow, rhythmically flooded, neither sea nor land, may have been among the first environments where life began to make the transition from water to land, where the regular exposure to air, combined with the shelter and nutrients of shallow water, created the conditions in which some ancient creature first began to manage both. If that is true, and it is a genuine scientific hypothesis, not a settled fact, then the moon's tidal influence may have been part of the mechanism by which life came ashore. The moon may have called life out of the ocean, slowly, rhythmically, without knowing it was doing anything at all. Light takes time to travel. This is one of those facts that sounds simple and then, if you sit with it, opens into something quietly vertiginous. The light from a candle reaches your eye almost instantly. The delay is so small as to be meaningless in ordinary experience. But at larger distances, the delay becomes real. When you look at the moon, you are seeing it as it was just over a second ago. The light reflecting off its surface tonight left the sun 8 minutes before that, struck the moon, and then took another 1.3 seconds to cross the distance to your eye. So the moon you see is not quite the moon that exists at this moment. It is the moon as it was 1.3 seconds in the past, which is, admittedly, almost nothing. The moon does not change much in 1.3 seconds, but the principle holds. Look at the sun, which you should not do directly, and you are seeing it as it was 8 minutes ago. Look at the nearest star beyond the sun, and you are seeing it as it was 4 years ago. Look at the Andromeda galaxy, faintly visible to the naked eye on a clear, dark night, and you are seeing it as it was 2.5 million years ago. The night sky is not a view of the present. It is a collection of views from different moments in the past, layered together into a single glance. The moon is the most recent layer, the most current image in the sky. And still, even it is arriving slightly late, a message sent 1.3 seconds ago, crossing the dark, arriving now. In the science of seismology, the study of how waves travel through planetary interiors, the moon has become an unexpected teacher. The Moonquake data, collected by the Apollo seismometers, running from 1969 to 1977, revealed something that Earth-based seismology had never encountered in quite the same form. A world so dry and cold and rigid in its interior that seismic waves, once introduced, travel through it with almost no absorption. On Earth, the presence of water throughout the crust and upper mantle dampens seismic waves. The fluidity of the partially molten asthenosphere absorbs energy. Earthquakes ring and then quiet in minutes. The planet is seismically soft, in a sense able to receive and dissipate energy without prolonged ringing. The moon is not soft. The moon rings, long and low and clean, like a bell of extraordinary size struck with a small hammer. Seismologists studying the moon had to develop new models, new mathematics to account for this behavior. The existing frameworks, built entirely on observations of a wet, tectonically active world, did not transfer cleanly. The moon required new thinking. This is one of the quieter gifts of exploration. Not just the discovery of what is there, but the discovery that what is there requires new ways of understanding. That the universe is larger than the frameworks we brought to it. The moon rang, and in ringing, taught us that we had been thinking too small. On nights when the moon is full and high and the sky is clear, and you are somewhere away from the glow of cities, something happens to familiar things. Shadows appear where shadows usually don't cast by moonlight, softer than sunlight but present, falling at slightly different angles than daytime shadows, because the moon is almost never directly overhead the way the noonday sun sometimes is. The shadow of a fence post stretches across pale grass. The shadow of a tree lies across a road, dark blue rather than black, shifting almost imperceptibly as the moon moves. These moonlit shadows have been the subject of painters and poets for as long as painting and poetry have existed. There is a quality to them, a softness, a slight uncertainty at the edges, a tendency to make the familiar look newly significant that ordinary daylight shadows don't quite carry. It is because the light is old and indirect and has traveled so far before it reaches you. The sun's light, direct and close, produces sharp shadows with clean edges. The moon's light, twice traveled, carries a gentleness that the edges of shadows seem to hold. Moonlit shadows are softer than they should be. They have a quality of suggestions rather than declarations. They say, here is where the light is not, approximately, more or less, depending on where you're standing. This is the moon's aesthetic. Soft edges, approximate truths, a gentle rather than insistent relationship with clarity. There are nights when that is exactly what you need. The moon has a shadow that stretches out behind it into space. This sounds obvious, of course it does. Everything with the sun on one side has a shadow, but the moon's shadow is a specific, measurable thing. A cone of darkness pointing away from the sun, traveling through space, touching the Earth whenever the alignment is right, and producing a solar eclipse. That shadow cone is roughly 870,000 miles long. At the moon's current distance from Earth, its tip just barely reaches us, which is why total solar eclipses produce such a narrow path of totality on Earth's surface. The very tip of a very long cone, touching a moving planet, tracing a narrow corridor of complete shadow as the moon moves on. But beyond that tip, the shadow continues, into the dark, growing wider, and then tapering, extending into the space past Earth, where it falls on nothing, illuminating nothing by its absence, touching no surface, for a very long way. The moon is always casting this shadow. Right now, on whatever side of the moon is facing away from the sun, a long cone of darkness is extending outward, silent, invisible, not touching anything tonight, perhaps, but there. Every object casts its shadow into the dark. Every solid thing creates a region of absence behind it, however briefly, however unseen. The moon's shadow has been sweeping through space for 4.5 billion years, falling on nothing most of the time, falling on everything briefly, completely, memorably on rare and well-traveled days. The oldest light you will see tonight, if the sky is clear, comes from farther than the moon by a factor of millions. But the most familiar light, the light that has been present in human experience longer than any other light source, is the moon. Not because it is the oldest, but because it is the most constant, the most reliable, the most present across the entire span of human experience. Fire was discovered at different times in different places. The stars were always visible but required darkness and clear skies. The sun was too bright to look at directly. But the moon, this particular size, this particular brightness, this particular soft and navigable light, has been available to human eyes on most nights, of most months, for every generation that has ever existed. There is a quality in the familiar that the extraordinary cannot replicate. The moon is not the most spectacular thing in the night sky. On a dark night, the Milky Way is more visually dramatic. A meteor shower is more immediately arresting. A comet, in the years when one is visible, draws more gasps. But the moon is always there, patiently cycling, returning, holding the same face toward this world it has always held, in the same patient rhythm it has always kept. Familiarity, at its best, is a form of reliability, a form of safety. The moon offers this not because it tries to, but because it simply continues, and continuity, over long enough periods, becomes its own kind of comfort. The moon is there. It has always been there. It will be there when you wake. Ancient astronomers, working without any of the instruments we now take for granted, mapped the moon with extraordinary patience and care. Giovanni Battista Riccioli, a 17th-century Italian Jesuit astronomer, created the naming system for lunar features that we still use today. He and his colleague Francesco Maria Grimaldi peered through telescopes that were, by modern standards, crude, limited in magnification, prone to optical distortion, requiring steady hands and clear skies and enormous patience. From these observations, they produced maps, detailed, careful, named maps, of a surface they could only see from a distance of 250,000 miles, through lenses ground by hand. They named the seas after weather and emotions: storms, serenity, tranquility, rains, because the dark plains looked to them like earthly oceans, and they reached for earthly words to hold them. Those names have persisted. Space agencies, international bodies, professional astronomers, all of them, continue to use a naming system created by a man with a handmade telescope in 17th century Italy, looking up on clear nights and reaching for words that captured what he felt. The Sea of Serenity, the Ocean of Storms, the Sea of Tranquility. These are not scientific terms. They are emotional responses, preserved in Latin, permanently attached to the surface of another world. They are the feelings of a careful human being, encountering something vast and unknown, written into the permanent record. The moon carries human feeling on its face. It always has. On the far side of the moon, there is a wound so large it changes the word large. The South Pole Aitken Basin is one of the largest confirmed impact craters in the solar system. It is so vast that if you stood at its center, the rim would be below your horizon, too far away to see, curving away with the moon's own surface. It is deeper than most mountains on Earth are tall. It is older than most features on the near side, formed in the early solar system when the neighborhood of planets was still chaotic and crowded with debris. And it faces away from us, entirely. It has been sitting on the far side, hidden from every human eye that ever looked up, since before there were eyes to look. When spacecraft finally imaged it, scientists found that the basin's floor contains minerals from deep inside the moon material, dragged up from the lunar mantle by the force of the impact, now sitting exposed on the surface, available for study if anyone could reach it. The moon's deepest interior, in other words, left traces of itself where the wound was deepest. The violence of the early solar system reached down into the moon and pulled something ancient upward into the light. This is what enormous impacts do across geological time. They reveal what was hidden. They bring the deep interior briefly, permanently, to the surface. What was buried becomes visible. What was enclosed becomes exposed, not gently, but fully, and without going back. Something that seems worth saying quietly, here in the second half of this long night. You have been listening for some time now. The facts have been arriving one after another, each one a small door into something larger than itself. And perhaps somewhere in the listening, your body has been doing what bodies do when they are given permission to be still, releasing the held tensions of the day, softening the grip on whatever needed to be gripped, settling toward the particular quality of rest that comes not from the absence of thought, but from thoughts that have no urgency in them. The moon has been doing this for people for a very long time, not through any mechanism science has fully mapped, not through any quality it possesses that it chose or cultivated, simply by being there, by being the same, by being the thing in the sky that does not change in any way a human lifetime can register. Right now, on the night side of the Earth, other people are looking at the same moon you might look at if you turned toward your window. People in languages you don't speak, in houses that look nothing like yours, under skies that carry different constellations at the horizon's edge, all of them seeing the same face, all of them perhaps feeling what you feel when something very old and very steady is simply present. The moon connects people across distance the way very few things do, not by doing anything, but by being equally available to everyone who looks. You are not alone in this looking. You have never been. The crescent moon is the most drawn shape in the history of human art. Not necessarily the most common subject. There are arguments to be made for the human figure, for animals, for the hand itself. But the crescent, that particular elegant arc of illuminated edge, appears across so many cultures and so many centuries and so many media that it constitutes something close to a universal visual language. It appears in ancient Mesopotamian cylinder seals, in Byzantine mosaics, in Islamic architecture, where it crowns minarets from Morocco to Indonesia, in the flags of more than a dozen nations, in jewelry found in archaeological sites across Europe and Asia and the Americas, in children's drawings, reached for instinctively, as if the shape were already known before it was taught. The crescent is the moon, in its most reduced, most essential form, just the lit edge, just the curve, just the minimum necessary to suggest the whole, and the whole is suggested. That thin arc of light is always recognizably lunar, always carrying the same associations: nighttime, gentleness, the reliable return of something that was briefly absent. There is something in the crescent shape that the eye finds restful, the curve without sharp angles, the arc that implies a circle, a completeness, a wholeness that is present even when only the edge is visible, the full thing implied by the part, the whole held inside the suggestion of itself. Here is something that scientists know, and that is worth holding gently. The moon is drifting away, slowly, as you know by now, a fingernail's width per year, patient and gradual and imperceptible. And as it drifts, as the distance between Earth and Moon very slowly grows, the Moon's apparent size in the sky very slowly shrinks, which means that in the deep future, billions of years from now, long past any concern of ours, total solar eclipses as they currently exist will no longer be possible. The Moon will have drifted far enough that it will no longer cover the Sun completely. It will transit the solar disk, as Venus sometimes does a small dark circle crossing a larger bright one. But the corona will not emerge. The sky will not darken. The particular, extraordinary coincidence of sizes that makes totality possible will have quietly ended. And in the deep past, when the Moon was much closer, young and warm from its formation, the Moon would have been so large in the sky that a solar eclipse would have been a different experience entirely. Not a precise covering, a vast, overwhelming darkness, the Moon's disk extending well beyond the Sun's, darkening a far wider corridor. The window for perfect eclipses, for the precise, exact, corona-revealing match of apparent sizes, is now. It has been now for all of human history. It will remain now for some time yet. We are living inside the era of perfect eclipses. We were born into it, without applying for it, without earning it, without knowing to ask. The Moon has a geography. This sounds straightforward, but consider it for a moment. A geography implies features named places, recognizable landmarks, locations that can be described and mapped and navigated between. And the Moon has all of these things, more of them, in some categories, than Earth does. Earth has roughly 1,600 named mountain peaks. The Moon has thousands of named craters, dozens of named mountain ranges, numerous named plains and valleys and scarps and rills, long, winding cracks in the surface, like ancient riverbeds that never held water. There are places on the Moon that sound like they belong in a story. The straight wall, a clean fault scarp that casts a sharp shadow, visible through a modest telescope. The Alpine Valley, a long gash through the lunar Alps that puzzled astronomers for centuries. The Marius Hills, a region of volcanic domes that rise gently from the surrounding plain like suggestions of hills, not quite committing to the shape. All of it mapped, all of it named, all of it sitting in its particular place on a world that has not rearranged itself in any meaningful way since the last volcanic activity faded hundreds of millions of years ago. The Moon's geography is fixed in a way Earth's is not. The straight wall was straight before there were humans. The Alpine Valley will still be a valley long after the Alps have eroded to plains. Some landscapes do not need maintenance. They simply persist, exactly as they are. There is a moment, on the night of a full moon, when the Moon rises exactly as the last light leaves the sky. The horizon in the east holds a faint brightness, Not quite the day's light, not quite the moon's, something between the two, a thin margin of transition. And then the moon lifts above that line, and for just a few minutes it is the color of the horizon itself, amber or pale orange, or the particular reddish gold that comes from its light passing through the thickest possible slice of atmosphere at the lowest possible angle. This is the same effect that makes sunsets red, the same physics. The atmosphere scatters the shorter wavelengths of light, the blues and greens, and lets the longer wavelengths, the reds and oranges, pass through. And a moon at the horizon has passed through more atmosphere than a moon overhead, so the effect is more pronounced. For a few minutes, the moon is the color of something warm, something that should give off heat. It hangs at the horizon, enormous with the moon illusion, the trick of perspective that makes the brain perceive a horizon moon as larger than a zenith moon, even though the angular size is identical, and it is the color of a fire seen through trees. And then it rises, and as it rises, the orange fades, the moon whitens. By the time it clears the first few degrees above the horizon, it is already silver, already itself, already the cool and patient presence it will be for the rest of the night. That brief warm color is a greeting, the moon arriving, unhurried, through the world's own light. The last human footfall on the moon happened on a December morning in 1972. Astronaut Gene Cernan, commander of Apollo 17, was the last to climb back up the ladder into the lunar module. Before he did, knowing, as he did, that this was likely to be the moment, for some time he paused. He did not make a long speech. He said a few quiet words, acknowledging the moment and the people who had made it possible, and expressing a hope that humanity would return. And then he put his foot on the bottom rung of the ladder and left the surface. His boot prints are still there, in the fine silver-grey dust of the Taurus Littrow Valley, in a place the mission had chosen for its ancient highland rocks and its relatively young volcanic features, in a silence that has not been broken since. The last human footprints on the moon are more than 50 years old and will remain as crisp and clear as the day they were made for millions of years. There is no wind to shift them, no moisture to soften them, no biological process to slowly absorb them back into the surface. They are simply there, patient, preserved, the exact shape of the last human step, held in ancient dust, in the most complete silence in the solar system, waiting, without urgency, for whoever comes next. The moon keeps a perfect record. Everything that has ever struck it is still there, written in the surface. Every meteorite, from the enormous Bayesian-forming impactors of the early solar system to the constant gentle rain of micrometeorites that falls even now, even tonight, onto the lunar surface, each one has left its mark, and each mark remains. Geologists can read this record like a book, though the reading requires patience and specialized knowledge and instruments that can tell the age of rock by the decay of radioactive elements within it. They can identify surfaces that are old by the density of their craters. More impacts means more time exposed. They can identify younger surfaces by their comparative smoothness, their relative freshness. They can reconstruct, from the crater record, the history of bombardment in the inner solar system, what scientists call the late heavy bombardment, a period roughly 4 billion years ago, when the rate of impacts across all the inner planets was vastly higher than it is now. They know about this period partly because the moon kept the evidence. Earth experienced the same bombardment, but Earth's restless geology erased the record. Plate tectonics swallowed the ancient craters. Rain and wind and biology covered what remained. The evidence is gone. The moon kept it. The moon kept everything. Nothing written on its surface has been erased. It is the most complete archive in the solar system, patient, undisturbed, and open to anyone who looks carefully enough. Every scratch on the moon is still there. Not just the footprints, not just the craters. Every mark made by anything that has ever touched the lunar surface remains held in the regolith with the same patient fidelity, the moon extends to everything. The tracks left by the lunar rovers, those small electric vehicles driven across the surface during the later Apollo missions, are still pressed into the dust in precise, tire tread lines. The equipment left behind the descent stages of the lunar modules, the seismometers, the retroreflectors, the American flags, all of it is still there, exactly where it was placed, aging in vacuum and radiation but not dissolving, not corroding in any atmosphere, not being grown over or absorbed back into anything living. The flags, scientists believe, have been bleached white by decades of unfiltered solar ultraviolet radiation still standing, or some of them still standing, but colorless now. The red and white stripes, the blue field and stars, all of it faded to the same pale nothing by a sun that the flags were never designed to face without an atmosphere between them. White flags on the moon, unintentionally, impermanently, and yet completely. There is no irony in it at that distance. Only the honest work of physics on fabric that was built for a few days and has now endured for decades in conditions no one fully anticipated. The moon keeps everything, including the parts of things that were never meant to last, including the shapes of moments that are long finished, held in dust, patient and exact, and quietly, permanently there. Something about the moon becomes clearer when you consider what it would be like without it. The nights would be darker, as you know by now. The seasons would be less stable. The tides would be smaller. The sun also pulls the oceans, but with less than half the force of the moon, and the rhythm would be different, less pronounced, less reliable as a clock and a calendar and a tide-driven habitat generator. But there is something subtler than all of this, something that takes a moment to locate. The moon gives the night a focal point, a place for the eye to rest. On a clear night without the moon, the sky is everywhere, equally star-scattered, beautiful, but without a center of gravity, without a single object that organizes the view. With the moon present, the eye is drawn. The mind has something to settle on. The vast, uncountable scatter of stars becomes a background, and the moon becomes a foreground, and the sky acquires a kind of composition it lacks without it. Human attention has always needed something to settle on: a fire in a dark room, a candle in a window, a fixed point in a field of movement. The moon, in the night sky, has served this purpose for every human mind that has ever looked up. It gives the dark a place to rest your gaze. It turns the night from an expanse into a view. It is the difference between standing at the edge of an ocean and standing at the edge of an ocean with a lighthouse. Not a warning, not an emergency, just a place to look, and in looking, to feel located. There is water in you that has been pulled by the moon. The human body is mostly water. The exact figure varies by age and body composition, but the general truth is that you are mostly fluid: blood, lymph, the water in every cell, the moisture in every tissue, and all of that water inside you is subject to the same gravitational physics as the water in the ocean. The moon's tidal effect on the water in a human body is extraordinarily small, far too small to measure, far too small to feel, far too small to have any detectable biological effect by any mechanism currently understood. This is worth saying clearly, because the claim that the moon affects human physiology in meaningful ways through its gravitational pull on bodily fluids is not well supported by evidence. And yet the principle is real. The moon's gravity acts on everything with mass, without exception, at every scale. The ocean feels it because it is enormous and connected and free to move. You feel it so little that you feel nothing. The difference is scale, not physics. So the water in you is being pulled by the moon tonight, not enough to matter, not enough to feel, not enough to change anything about how you sleep or dream or breathe, but pulled in the same direction, by the same force, for the same reason. The moon makes no exceptions. It is simply that some things are large enough to respond visibly, and others carry their response too quietly to detect. One of the strangest and most human details of the Apollo missions is what the astronauts brought with them. Not the scientific equipment that was planned, budgeted, essential, not the food or the tools or the communication systems, the personal items. The things they were allowed to carry in a small personal preference kit, a few ounces of weight, their own choice, into space and to the moon and back. Seeds, photographs, a piece of a sister's wedding dress, a signet ring, medals from earlier aviation pioneers, a fragment of wood from the Wright brothers' first airplane, which had flown at Kitty Hawk only 66 years before Apollo 11 landed on the moon, a distance of time so brief it barely seems possible. One astronaut carried a small piece of the true cross, loaned by a cardinal. Another carried a gold olive branch, left on the lunar surface. Another carried a pin that belonged to his son. These objects went to the moon and came back, changed by nothing except having been there. They look the same, they weigh the same, but they carry something that cannot be measured. The fact of having been in that place, at that distance, in that silence. We have always brought our small, personal, irreplaceable things with us into the unknown. It is one of the most human gestures there is. Not practical, not necessary. Simply true to what we are, beings who carry meaning in objects, who cannot go somewhere important without bringing something that says, I was here, and this mattered to me. Every ocean on Earth breathes because of the moon. This is not a metaphor you have to reach for. The tides are genuinely the ocean's breath, the slow, twice-daily rise and fall of water against every coast on the planet, driven by the moon's gravitational pull and the Earth's rotation, carrying coastlines through the tidal bulge and back again. High tide, low tide, high tide, low tide. 2 full cycles every 24 hours and 50 minutes. The extra 50 minutes accounting for the fact that the moon has moved slightly in its orbit since the previous day, and the Earth has to rotate a little further to catch up to it. This rhythm has shaped every coastline on Earth. The tidal range, the difference in water level between high and low tide, varies enormously, depending on the shape of the coastline and the geometry of the local ocean basin. In the Bay of Fundy in Canada, the tidal range reaches 16 meters. The water rises and falls by the height of a 4-story building, twice a day, every day, driven by the moon. In enclosed seas like the Mediterranean, the tidal range is almost nothing, a few centimeters, barely perceptible. The ocean's geometry does not amplify the signal, but everywhere, the signal is there. In every harbor and every estuary and every tidal flat and every rocky shore where the waterline leaves its mark on the stone, the moon is there in the pattern, in the twice-daily shift, in the slow breathing of water against the edge of the land. The ocean breathes, and the moon is why. The moon, seen through even a modest telescope on a clear night, becomes a different object entirely. Not larger than the eye expects, actually. The eye usually expects more magnification than a small telescope provides, and is sometimes briefly disappointed before the mind catches up. But detailed in a way the naked eye cannot access. The craters become 3-dimensional. The shadows inside them become deep and textured. The mountain ranges catch the light at their peaks while their slopes are still in shadow, so that the mountains appear to float bright points of light, rising out of darkness at the terminator, the boundary between day and night. This effect, called the appearance of isolated peaks in the darkness just past the terminator, was one of the first things Galileo described when he turned a telescope to the moon in 1609. He recognized what he was seeing: mountains, light hitting the tops while the slopes were still in shadow, the same way a mountain on Earth catches the last light of sunset at its peak, while the valley below has already gone dark. Galileo drew what he saw: careful drawings, made by hand at the eyepiece, trying to capture in ink what the telescope was showing him. The drawings are imperfect. The optics of his telescope introduced distortions, and drawing by candlelight after dark was not ideal. But they were the first detailed representations of a world beyond Earth, the first attempt to record another world's geography with scientific intention. Someone looked carefully and drew what they saw, and everything followed from that looking. There is a particular quality of moonlight on water that painters have been chasing for centuries. The way the moon's reflection breaks on the surface of a lake or an ocean. Not a single stable image, the way the sun's reflection can be at certain angles, but a scattered, dancing path of silver that points directly toward the viewer, following them as they move, seeming always to be aimed at them specifically. This effect has a name, the opposition surge, or more poetically, the lunar Heiligenschein. It is caused by the way water surfaces scatter light, and by the geometry of reflection from a distributed light source at a specific angle. The physics is well understood and entirely precise, and yet it looks like attention. It looks like the moon is reaching toward you specifically, extending a path of light across the water that ends at your feet. That no matter where you stand on the bank, the path ends at you. Every person who has ever stood at the edge of water under a full moon has experienced this effect. Every painter who has tried to capture it has faced the same challenge. The path of light is real, and it moves with the viewer, and there is no fixed, objective version of it to paint. You can only paint the version as seen from one place, by one set of eyes, at one moment. The moon seems to address you directly from across the water. It is an illusion produced by geometry, entirely explicable, and it still feels, in the body, like being seen. Scientists who study the moon are called selenologists, from Selene, the Greek goddess of the moon, who drove her silver chariot across the sky each night, her light falling on the sleeping world below. The goddess became a science. The mythology became a methodology. The story became a field of study with journals and conferences and doctoral dissertations and instruments launched into orbit and sample return missions, and debates about the composition of the lunar mantle. And yet something of Selene persists in the name. The word carries the old story inside it, the chariot, the light, the careful crossing of the sky. When a selenologist publishes a paper about crater formation rates or the composition of the lunar regolith, the goddess is still in the title of their profession, quietly. Language does this. It holds the history of how people first understood things alongside the precision of how people currently understand them. The word carries both, simultaneously, without contradiction. We named the science after the myth, and the myth was itself an attempt at science, an explanation, in the language available at the time, of what the moon was, and why it moved, and what its light meant. Selene driving her chariot across the sky was, in its way, a model, an attempt to account for the observed behavior of a thing that moved, regularly, in the dark. The questions were the same. Only the language and the precision have changed. The moon has seen everything. This is the kind of statement that sounds like poetry, and turns out, when examined, to be straightforwardly true. The moon has been in orbit around Earth for 4.5 billion years. It has been in the sky, this sky, above this planet, for the entirety of Earth's biological history. Every species that has ever existed on this planet has lived and died beneath the moon. The dinosaurs lived under this moon. They looked up at it, or at least, their eyes received its light, whether or not they attended to it the way we do. The first flowers opened under this moon. The first birds flew under it. The first whales returned to the ocean under it. Every mass extinction and every recovery happened under this moon, which continued its orbit through all of it, unmoved by any of it, in the way that stone and gravity are unmoved by life, not indifferent, exactly, just operating at a different scale. The Cambrian explosion, that extraordinary diversification of animal life roughly 500 million years ago, when the oceans filled with complex creatures in what is, geologically speaking, a very short time happened under this moon. The first human footsteps in the first African landscapes happened under this moon. The first fire, the first cave painting, the first spoken word, all of it under this patient, continuing, ancient light. The moon has been present for all of it, silent, unchanged, looking exactly as it looks tonight. The witness does not need to understand what it has witnessed for the witnessing to be real. Twice a day, every ocean on Earth exhales. The tide goes out. The water pulls back from the shore, retreating along the sand and the rock and the tidal flat, leaving behind the glistening, briefly exposed world of the intertidal zone, that narrow margin of life that belongs to neither sea nor land entirely, that has organized itself around the precise rhythm of the moon's pull and the Earth's turning. In that retreating water, in that twice-daily exhalation, nutrients move. Deep water upwells to replace surface water that has been pushed elsewhere by the tidal flow. Sediment is carried and deposited. The chemistry of estuaries shifts. Fish follow the moving water. Birds follow the fish. The entire biological cascade of a coastal ecosystem breathes in time with the moon, whether any part of it knows the moon exists. The moon has been conducting this movement for longer than there have been fish to follow it, longer than there have been birds, longer than there has been anything with a nervous system complex enough to respond to the change. The ocean breathed before there was anything alive in it to benefit from the breathing. The moon pulled the water before the water held anything that needed pulling. The rhythm was established early, and life arrived into a rhythm that was already there, and organized itself around what it found. You arrived into a world that had its rhythms already. The tides were already tidal. The seasons were already seasonal. The moon was already in the sky, already pulling, already patient. You did not have to establish any of this. It was already, quietly, in place. Every person alive right now who is standing in darkness is looking at the same moon. Not every person, those on the day side of the Earth, have the sun above them, and the moon, if it is up, is faint against a bright sky. But everyone in the night, everyone in the hours between dusk and dawn across the entire night side of the planet, they are all, if the sky is clear and they happen to look, seeing the same object, the same face, the same arrangement of dark plains and bright highlands, the same craters, named and unnamed, the same sea of tranquility, the same ocean of storms, the same gentle and unchanging pattern that every human eye has always seen. In this moment, there are people looking at the moon from mountainsides and from boats on open water, and from windows in tall buildings in cities, whose names you may never know. People who are awake because they cannot sleep, and people who stepped outside for a moment before bed, and people who are working through the night and paused and looked up. People who are young, and people who are old, and people who are somewhere in the middle, in all the ordinary complexity of human lives. All of them seeing the same thing, all of them receiving the same light, the same reflected sun, the same ancient surface, the same patient and unchanging face. You are among them, if you choose to be. The moon makes no distinction. It offers itself equally to whoever looks, in whatever language, from whatever place. The company is vast. The looking is quiet. The moon is the same for all of it. Scientists who study the moon's interior have a genuine mystery on their hands, and they hold it with the particular kind of pleasure that real scientists bring to things they do not yet understand. The moon's core, small, iron-rich, possibly partially molten, does not behave in all the ways the models predict. The precise size of the inner core relative to the outer core is still debated. The exact composition of the boundary layers between the core and the mantle is not fully resolved. The history of the moon's magnetic field, which was once stronger than it is now, and has since faded to almost nothing, is not completely explained by any single current model. Moonquake data from the Apollo seismometers helped enormously, but those instruments ran for less than a decade, and they were all placed in the same general region of the near side. The far side has never had a seismometer. The poles have never had one. The moon's interior has been heard from one angle only, through instruments that have been silent for nearly 50 years. New missions are planned. New seismometers are being designed. The mystery is not forgotten. It is simply waiting for better instruments, more locations, more data. There is something deeply calming about a mystery that is not urgent, a question that will be answered eventually, carefully, by patient people with good instruments, when the time and resources align. No crisis, no deadline, just a question sitting quietly in the science, waiting for the next conversation. The moon keeps its interior to itself, for now, and the scientists wait and plan and find the waiting interesting rather than frustrating. The moon changes the color of the night, not dramatically, not in a way that announces itself, but the presence of the moon in the sky, even a crescent, even a half-moon several hours from rising, adds light to the atmosphere, softens the darkness, gives the clouds a visible texture, and the horizon a faint luminosity that would not be there without it. On a night with a bright moon, the sky itself has color a deep, particular blue that is different from the blue of day, softer and less saturated, somewhere between midnight and the faintest suggestion of dawn. This color comes from the moon's light scattering in the atmosphere, the way sunlight scatters to produce the blue of day, but reduced, gentled, shifted toward a quieter part of the spectrum. Artists call this quality luminous dark, the sky that is dark but not without light, the night that has enough in it to see by, to feel the space of, to understand as a vast and inhabited thing rather than a simple absence of day. Without the moon, night skies are beautiful in their own way, more stars, more depth, more of the far universe visible. But the quality of the dark is different, harder, more absolute. The moon softens the night, makes it habitable, gives it just enough light to feel like a place rather than an absence, and in doing so, has made the night safe, or at least safer for every creature that has ever moved through it. The night has always had a little light in it, almost always, just enough. The moon saw to that. The moon holds the memory of impacts that no longer happen. The early solar system was a violent place crowded with debris, still sorting itself into stable orbits, full of objects that had not yet found their place, or been swept up by a planet's gravity, or ejected into the outer dark. The rate of impacts on all the inner planets during this period was vastly higher than it is now. The moon's surface, unprotected by atmosphere, received everything. But that period ended. The solar system settled. The debris was gradually cleared. The rate of impacts dropped and dropped again, and is now so low that a significant impact on the moon is an event measured in millions of years, not thousands. The moon's heavily cratered surface is a portrait of a time that is over, a record of a violent past that has since become a quiet present. The craters are not scars in the emotional sense, they are simply preserved evidence of a phase of history that ran its course and ended, leaving behind a world that has had billions of years of relative peace since. The violence was real. It is over. What remains is the record, held in stone, aging without urgency, and the long peace that followed. Some of the most heavily marked surfaces are the most tranquil places now. The marking is the history. The present is the stillness. The moon shows this clearly. Worn face, quiet now. Worn face, at rest. The moon will be in the sky tomorrow. This is so obvious it barely seems worth saying. And yet it is, in its way, one of the most reliable facts available to a human being in any era. Through every period of history, every war, every plague, every famine, every political collapse, every personal crisis, every ordinary difficult day, the moon has risen, has moved through its phases, has been there the following night, and the night after that. There have been nights when it was covered by clouds. There have been new moon nights when it was absent from the visible sky. But it was there, above the clouds, behind the new moon's invisible face, continuing its orbit with the same patient consistency it has maintained for 4.5 billion years. People who have lived through very hard times often describe small consistencies as anchoring, the way a familiar sound, a regular meal, a fixed point in a difficult day can provide something to organize around. Not a solution, not a resolution, just a continuity. A proof that some things are continuing, even when everything else feels uncertain. The moon is the longest-running continuity available to a human eye, longer than any institution, any tradition, any language, any mountain range, longer than the human species, longer than anything alive. It will be there tomorrow, as it has always been, as it will continue to be, long past any worry you are carrying tonight. The worry is temporary. The moon is not. Moonlight has been falling on sleeping faces since there were faces. Before there were houses, before there were windows, before there were curtains to block it, moonlight fell on people sleeping in the open, under the sky. As human beings have slept for the vast majority of the time there have been human beings. It fell on their closed eyes. It illuminated the slow rise and fall of their breathing. It moved across their faces as the night progressed and the moon tracked its arc above them. There is no record of what this felt like. The sleepers left no account, but it is reasonable to imagine more than imagine, to sense that it was not frightening, that something in the body, evolved under that light for hundreds of thousands of years, found it familiar, found it perhaps, in the way that deep and wordless biology finds things, appropriate, right, a part of the expected world. You are resting now, perhaps, or nearly. The moon may or may not be visible from where you are. It may be on the other side of the building, or behind clouds, or below the horizon at this hour, but it is there. And if its light happens to find its way to you through a gap in the curtain, or reflecting off something pale outside your window, arriving softened and cool and ancient and gentle, you are receiving something that sleeping faces have always received. The oldest light to ever touch a face at rest, still arriving, still the same, still quiet. The moon asks nothing of you tonight. It does not require that you think about it, or understand it, or feel a particular way in its presence. It does not need to be acknowledged to continue doing what it does. It does not depend on your attention for its orbit, or your awareness for its phases, or your wakefulness for the tides it moves beneath you. It is simply there, doing what it has always done, in the way that very old and very steady things do what they do without urgency, without expectation, without any requirement that the things below it be in any particular state. You can be tired. You can be uncertain. You can be at the end of a difficult day, or the end of a difficult year, or somewhere in the middle of something that doesn't yet have a name. The moon does not require that you be otherwise. It continues regardless, patient and vast and entirely undemanding, in the sky above whatever is happening in your life, as it has been above everything that has ever happened in any life. There is a particular rest available in the presence of something that wants nothing from you, that exerts no pressure, that offers its light and its steadiness, and its ancient, quiet company without any conditions attached. The moon offers exactly this. It has always offered it. Tonight is no different from any of the billions of nights before it in this respect. You are here. The moon is there. That is enough. It has always been enough. Right now, in the hours while you rest, the world continues. The tides are moving, somewhere on every coast. The moon is in its arc, crossing whatever part of the sky belongs to it tonight. Moonlight is falling on oceans and forests and deserts, and the tops of mountains and the surfaces of still lakes, and the sleeping faces of people in every time zone on the night side of this turning world. Somewhere, a tide is coming in. Somewhere, it is going out. Somewhere, the moon is rising orange above a flat horizon, and somewhere else it is high and silver, and casting the soft shadows of trees across pale ground. Somewhere, an astronomer is tracking its position with instruments built for precision, and somewhere, a child is being carried outside to be shown it for the first time, and somewhere, someone very old is looking at it from a window, the way they have looked at it 10,000 times before. All of this is happening, quietly, without announcement, the way the most continuous things happen, not dramatically, not seeking any particular response, but with the steady persistence of processes that have been running for longer than any observer has been present to watch. You are part of this world that continues. Your breathing is part of it. The slow movement of your body toward rest is part of it. The fact that you have been listening to these quiet facts about a quiet world for this long, letting them wash through you like the light they describe, that is part of it too. Nothing needs to be resolved tonight. Nothing needs to be decided or fixed or understood more than it already is. The moon is in its place. The tides are in their rhythm. The ancient dust is still, and the ancient rock holds its memory, and somewhere, in a permanently shadowed crater near the South Pole, ice that arrived on a comet billions of years ago rests in a darkness that has never been interrupted. Still, patient, held, and now, quietly, we arrive at the end of this long and gentle night together. You have traveled far, in the particular way that stillness allows, from footprints held in ancient dust to the ghostly sodium drifting above an airless world, from the first clay tablets that marked the moon's phases to the laser pulses that still bounce off mirrors left by human hands, from the moment of the moon's violent birth to the long, slow future in which it will outlast the star that lights it. All of it held in the same patient sky that is above you now. All of it contained in that familiar disk of reflected light that has been with every person who has ever lived, from their first night to their last. Let your body settle now, if it hasn't already. Let the breath do what the breath knows how to do, deepening on its own, slowing on its own, finding the rhythm that the sleeping body has always known. The moon is there, or nearly there, somewhere in the sky beyond your walls. It has been there through every night you have ever slept. It asked nothing of any of them. It will ask nothing of this one. The tides are moving, slowly, beneath a surface you cannot see. The footprints are still there, exactly as they were left, held in a silence so complete it has become its own kind of peace. The ancient ice rests in its ancient dark, and somewhere, very gently, the moon continues its arc, patient and vast and quietly faithful, as it has always been, as it will always be, long past any moment either of us will need to be concerned with. You are small and held, and part of something that has been going on for a very long time. That is enough. You are enough. Tonight is enough. Rest now. The moon is keeping watch. I hope you sleep well and dream softly. Good night.